All right.
Well, hello, Ashley.
Hi, how are you?
I'm doing well. It's a Monday morning, and during our break, I've been giving a lot of thought to this whole concept of business basics. And I thought this first live class, since we've started back again, would be an opportune time to focus on what we do as service providers. I think most of us are service providers. We're the ones actually making contact with the client and creating the value that clients come to expect.
That's very true. And it is our role to be the captain of the ship when it comes to driving the service, from everything to products we've decided to use to how the service actually goes. And as we go into business basics, you've got some really great info about how to simplify your services and sort of streamline your process now that we have all these extra things that we have to do in between.
We do have more to do. And when we're creating our services initially, it's a moment in time. It's a moment in time where we're younger, less experienced. We may not have access to as many different things. New products and techniques come along, and it's the right thing to do periodically to review your services and make sure that what you're doing is optimal.
Couldn't have said it better myself.
All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Give me just a moment here to make sure I'm on the right thing. Here we go. All right, so we're starting today with this topic of simplifying your services. And you might think that you already have it as simple as you can have it. You're doing just the bare minimum. But I think over time, we think that we have to do more in order to attract more clients, to charge more, to create more value for the clients we have. And I would say just the opposite is true. And given all of this time that we had either away from the salon, unable to do services, or we've been scrambling to make better use of our time and better use of the resources we do have, it really made me think again about what is it that I actually do when I provide services, and what is it that the clients are really paying for.
Yeah, it seems like there's this justification of value or price, um, by adding more and doing more and being fluffy with the amounts of things we have to purchase and do and add to the protocols.
So I thought I'd start with this quote: "You don't get paid for the hour, you get paid for the value you bring to the hour." And that's so true when we think in terms of whether we as service providers are essential. And I know this was a topic of conversation, it probably still will be going forward, whether our services could be considered essential, or how is it that we do bring this value to the time that we spend with our clients. And not all of our time is equal, right? So the time that I spend with a client, the same amount of time would be spent differently from someone else spending time with that same person. So this is the value that I bring to my clients and they've come to expect.
Mhm.
It's different for everyone.
Yeah, and that's what makes us unique, and that's what makes us not necessarily competition with each other, but really just competition with how great we can each be ourselves.
And this may be the one class where we're not really talking about quantifying it so much as maybe qualifying it. And in
Mhm.
quantifying it, we'd be talking about cost per service and putting a value on each minute that you spend and doing all of that. But this is a more qualitative process. So let's think about what exactly we can accomplish in 60 minutes. And I use 60 minutes, I use the hour because it's the unit of time that we most often think of in terms of how much time we spend at the salon, how much time we spend doing a particular service with a client. And the client thinks of it too, even more so now. In my situation, I'm not able to do simultaneous services with employees. I have to spend all the time with one client doing all the services within an appointment. So what used to take just an hour now takes 2 hours if they want two 1 hour long services. So this 60 minutes means a lot more than it used to.
That's a great point.
So there's some basic considerations, no matter what service you're providing, no matter what your specialty is, whether it's hair, skin, nails, massage, it really doesn't matter. There are some basic considerations because we are licensed as professionals. The first one, of course, is safety. We'll just get this out of the way right away. You need to, of course, follow the health and safety regulations. The quality of the work has to be professional quality. And then lastly is consistency, in that you can't do one thing one time and then something completely different for that same service the next time, because clients come to expect consistency. That's part of what they're paying for, is the fact that they know what to expect and that you're going to deliver.
And that is the biggest struggle, I think.
Well, hopefully, through this process of simplifying your services, you'll be able to get to that point where what you do is not only the best you could possibly do, but will be something you'll be able to repeat over and over again. I like this quote because I think it speaks to what we do. We think of ourselves as being talented in bringing all of these unique skills and our personality and just whatever it is, je ne sais quoi, to our services. But really, if we can't describe what we're doing, we really haven't really thought about it deeply enough.
Hmm.
And if anyone's had any experience trying to teach someone to do something else, it's really, really hard to explain if you haven't really thought about it yourself. So I'd like us to approach our services as if we were going to have to train someone else to do them, even if we work by ourselves. I know a lot of us work by ourselves. I've done that for many years. Now I actually work with employees, and I've had to train employees to do services the way that I want them done in my salon space. But I think we need to approach it as if we were going to have to train someone. And then you're going to think a lot differently about all the different things that you do when you reach for your tools, when you use a particular product, the way that you have organized your services, the steps that you take, the steps you don't take. Do you follow the manufacturer's instructions to a T, or do you put your own spin on them? These are all things that you need to consider when you're trying to simplify your services, because otherwise all you're doing are following manufacturer protocols, or perhaps you're doing what you learned in beauty school. And we know that's not the best way to accomplish things. And here's the last quote I'm going to throw at you, is to not make the process any harder than it has to be. And I think that's what's happened to us over time, is things just get more and more complicated, and it takes something drastic, and I don't think anything could be more drastic than being shut down, to take a step back and really look at what you're doing, the tools you're using, the products you're using, the amenities you might have offered before, and ask yourself, is this really necessary? Is this essential to what I offer? Does this define what I offer? Or could I strip away some of these things and make it more about the interaction between you and the client? Everyone wants to offer good customer service, and I'm one of those people that feels the same way. I happen to refer to my customers as clients. I like to think that we have a bit more of a relationship than just to call them a customer or a consumer. But we really want to cater to them to an extent. Not so much that they get whatever they want, because we know that's not how we work, but because we know that taking into account those basic considerations of safety, quality, and consistency, we need to do our best for them. And I think we need to focus our attention on them and what we're doing. And in doing that, we need to, as far as the service is concerned, try to ignore all the other things that we'd normally be doing to manage our businesses. And that goes to even whether or not you answer the phone or respond to texts or emails when you're working with a client. I think it really helps us if we increase the interaction, like the direct being with the client, hands on the client, and not being distracted by everything else that could go on around that time that we have with them. Ashley, do you have any thoughts about that? Because I know that we've talked about being responsive to clients and being on top of things, but I think sometimes what we don't understand is that the time that we're spending with a client in our presence, that client has to take precedence.
This is a huge struggle for me. I feel sometimes I make myself too available during appointments or interactions, just because I want to make sure, I have all of my bases covered. There are tools, however, that can facilitate some of this, like quick replies on Instagram, or um, an answering service, or whatever it is that you need to do to really disconnect, and devote that time to the client, because they are compensating you for that chunk of time, whatever that is. But I think this harkens back to your earlier point about consistency. It's, if you know what your policy is before it happens. So if they want to come and read the water meter, if they, you've got somebody calling to cancel last second, like what are you going to do in those situations? And prepare yourself for that ahead of time, so that when it does happen, you don't have to be pulled in 15 different directions. And this is, I think, maybe one of the hardest things that we do, because we do have to juggle so many tasks while we're actually performing a service.
Particularly when we work alone, right? If we had someone to
Yeah,
defer to, if we had a receptionist or an employee or someone else that was managing some of those functions, it would be easier because we do wear so many hats. It's hard to just be in the moment and be present for the client and understand that if you were to devote your time and your attention 100% on this client, you'd actually get things done faster.
true. Yeah, multitasking is one of those things that you do 15 things poorly instead of one or two things really well.
So I'd like to think that we could set expectations, and your clients aren't going to know what to expect when it's their first time visiting you. But I want clients to realize that when they come to visit, that the time that we spend together, they're not going to hear the phone ring, for example, because we actually silence the phone. It happens to be a landline. We silence that phone so they're not hearing it ring. I silence my cell phone so they're not going to hear any calls or any dings from text messaging or emails coming through there either. We want it to seem as much as possible that the only communication we're having for the time that the client spends in the salon is directly with the client. And then, as far as additional expectations of focused and being attentive, I'd want the client to reciprocate. I would want the client to know that once they come in, I'm expecting the same of them. I'm not expecting them to dash in, drop everything, go use the bathroom, be distracted, say, oh, quick, I need to make a phone call. I mean, that isn't fair to us as service providers either. So I think the expectations have to be met equally.
Ooh. And again, getting into how do you handle that situation? I have a lot of clients that are literally on Zoom calls with one hand to me and the other on their laptop. And it can really disrupt your cadence of like, okay, now I need your attention because I have to hold your foot up, or I need your attention because if you keep trying to, peek at your phone during a lash service, like that's just not going to work. So setting that expectation is so important. I love that you've laid it out in these very actionable steps like this.
There's so much problem solving that we have to do just dealing with whatever the client presents to us, whatever the condition of their hair, skin, or nails. There's so much that we're doing already, but that added layer of behavior could make it more complicated and will certainly set you off in terms of not having the amount of time that you need to do what you need to do. And then that gets into whether or not you're going to actually be able to produce the results the client is paying for. You can't at the end of the service explain to the client, well, that didn't quite turn out the way I wanted, but it's your fault because you were distracted and I didn't have you in the chair for as long as I needed. You can't say that to a client. So they're still expecting the results because they're paying you the same amount of money. And yet you're having to manage all these other distractions that really aren't fair to you or the client. It doesn't help you do your best work.
Everyone I work on is distracted and doing other things. So I've just tried to streamline my process in that I'm going to do one whole hand and then pick everything up, move to the other side so that they have a hand free for their phone or whatever. Because I can't create that expectation where I'm like, excuse me, J-Lo, I need you to, focus up. I've never done J-Lo's nails. I'm just using her as an example. But there are things we can control, even in situations where it feels like nothing is in control. We can control ourselves and our processes and procedures.
I'm glad to hear you say that because I think that's where we need to be responsible for the work that we do and the results that we produce. And if it means setting these expectations and encouraging a client to go along, because then they're going to be more pleased with the results. I think that's worthwhile for everyone.
Yeah, if the client is the wild card, you are the other 52 cards in the deck. You hold all of the other cards, and what what happens, the environment, the tools, everything.
So let's talk about perfecting your procedures, because that's something that we can focus on even before we ever see our first client. I encourage everyone to write a procedure manual. And that might seem like a wasted exercise because you just know how to do what you do. But for every service you offer, it's worthwhile to write it out as a step by step and be really specific, as if someone were going to be trained from it, or that you could share it with someone and that they would understand what it is that you wanted them to do. Writing it down really lays it out for you and makes you think about, and why do I do it the way I do that? What's the rationale? Why am I using four different tools when perhaps I could use two? It's hard to know these things because we do get into these habits, and we find that over time we're sort of using a little bit from what we learned in beauty school, and then maybe something we learned from a class or something that we saw on a video. And over time, our services just become this sort of mishmash of all these different techniques and things that we've absorbed, but we haven't really evaluated for ourselves.
And this is so smart that you're suggesting this, because this is also something that has been suggested by liability insurance carriers, that if you have an established procedure written down in a manual, if something were to go wrong, you can refer back to it and say, this is what I do every time, to the point that I've written it down. Trish just commented that she's written a few step-by-steps for salons that she's worked at, and they really make you think about what you're doing and why.
That's an excellent point. I love the idea about the liability insurance, because that certainly might come up if someone were to
Mhm.
get injured. And Trish's point about other salons, when you have individuals working in a space, even if you all started with the same manual and the same procedure, over time, if you don't stick to it, people will start developing their own thing, and they will start doing it their own way, and either rearranging steps or dropping things off, or adding their own flavor, as it were, and things start falling apart. And this is where I like to make the analogy, here we go with the food analogies, to a fast food restaurant, because that is so automated, that is so routine, that we almost don't need humans performing the work. That's how I want the procedure manual to look, in terms of, this is what we do, as if we're inputting the client and inputting the service provider, and then the output are these results.
Yes, results. I was just going to say, this is how you ensure, but not only that you're protected, but this is how you ensure your results. If you've got somebody with a secret squirrel base coat that they pull out that no one else uses, and it's like they're whatever, then you start to get divergent results, and we don't want that. We want uniformity. We want good expectations.
And this is separate from if someone were doing, hair color and was coming up with a color formulation for each client. That is client by client. But the procedure of, whether you're applying it to dry hair, what toner you're using, are you using toner, like all those other things are things that come in a sequence for a reason, particularly if you're doing chemical services.
Yeah, order of operations kind of stuff.
Definitely in order. And I think when we get into these routines, it's really hard to bust ourselves out, but researching your options is hugely important, because you may find over time that the options don't exist any longer as companies change and products get discontinued or they get reformulated. It's amazing how different things can be, and you might find that you're all of a sudden scrambling to replace something that was a part of your procedure up until this point, and now you're forced to do something different.
Or that there's something more efficient out there that you hadn't even considered.
And I love efficiencies. And one of the easiest ones is just to look through what you're doing, and ask yourself, is there anything here that I can get rid of that won't impact the results or the client experience? Because if it's a matter of fluff, I think it's something that you can get rid of, because if we're going to keep it simple, if we're going to try to make it as efficient as possible, we'd want to eliminate any steps, tools, or products that are unnecessary, because those tools are things that we'd either have to clean or perhaps dispose of if they're just single use items. The products are things that we're purchasing and using, and we may have to clean containers. It's just not worth it to me to pad a service with that if it doesn't, in fact, add anything or create a better result at the end.
Don't pad unless it adds.
That's a good idea. Limiting the products, again, I think of this category by category, and maybe coming from the nail world, it may be more our problem than it is the problem of skincare and hair people. You don't talk to hair people who are using four different color lines. Have you ever talked to any hair people, Ashley, that use four different color lines?
Not really. I mean, maybe probably two or three at the absolute most if they're doing fantasy and everything else, but it's probably way too hard to keep track of all of the best practices for that many product lines.
Not only best practices, but the investment. If you had to invest in all the different colors that you would need to create what you're trying to create, it just becomes hugely expensive to have product from multiple lines. And I think this is one of the things that we sort of get ourselves into a trap where, especially for the kind of person who can't buy just one color of something, we need to buy the complete set, or we feel like we have to have every possible option that's offered by a brand. I think that's a huge trap for us.
What are you trying to say to me right now?
I'm not speaking to you directly, although if you sense yourself in any of this, if you recognize yourself, then you know who you are.
Mm, okay, I feel seen.
Limiting the products, for me, one of the examples that I use is pure acetone. It works fabulously to remove traditional polish. It could be used to soak off gel polish. If I were to use a soak off gel polish, I don't. But it also works as a nail prep. It does multiple jobs well. And I don't need a whole bunch of different products, particularly branded ones, to accomplish that task when pure acetone works really well.
Yeah,
And then
your
as far
back
as
bar doesn't necessarily have to reflect your retail shelf. If you've got a cleanser that can work for all skin types, that doesn't mean your back bar, has to have every possible indication. Your retail shelf can still be a retail shelf.
That's a good point, because I think we think about what we use and then what we retail as two different things. It would be easiest to retail what we use to the extent that we can without selling products that we feel are really better off in the hands of a professional. And again, we've talked about how we're responsible, whether we're manufacturing that product or not. If we're selling that product, we're still responsible for it as business persons. And then lastly, as far as perfecting a procedure, this is a process that really never ends. Just when I think I've hit upon like, oh, this is the most ideal way to do this service, within a couple of years, I'm revising it again. So I think we just need to go along and take moments when we're not forced to revise our procedures and make sure that we're doing everything up to date. And if we do find ourselves diverging wildly from the last thing that we committed to in writing, it's time to rewrite that procedure manual.
So what would be the minimum you would recommend for revising or revisiting or even just reviewing your procedures?
I would say like every 18 months is probably a good time frame. It kind of depends on what space you're in, because in some fields it just seems like things are changing a lot faster, or the options are swiftly changing. uh, I think everyone should have been doing it during this time period, because we do have the additional procedures around cleaning. We have things that we're not able to do, the amenities that we're not able to offer right now, those kinds of things which were not part of the service, but they certainly were part of how we interacted with clients. So when we do get back to the basics and we realize, this thing that, was part of my service before, not only is it not necessary, but it kind of goes against what the guidelines would be during a pandemic, then maybe that's something we need to lose. Maybe that's something that I don't want to have to worry about changing in the future. If what we're dealing with now in terms of regulations might be with us for a while and the guidance might be with us for a while, it would be wiser to strip it down to the most basic thing.
Sure.
And let's talk about prepping our workspace, because these are things that we can get done before we ever actually see the client. This is the stuff that clients shouldn't necessarily have to see, but they just know it's been taken care of and they know it was done according to a standard. But I would put this in the manual as well. I would talk
Mhm.
about, like, what does it look like? You could even take photographs of your station set up and put that in the manual so that people could understand that, and people being yourself, just like, oh my gosh, look at how my station looked at one point. And over time, as you replace things or you find better containers to work from or other ways to reduce the clutter around you as you're working, you'll be amazed at how different your workspace looks. I love looking at photos online when people post of their stations and their tables, if they're working from a table, or their treatment rooms. It's amazing to me. I think over time, I know I certainly have decluttered a lot. And it makes it look interesting that it looks like you don't even do services, right? It just looks like furniture at a point. And you wonder, well, how does it even get done? Well, it's because you don't necessarily have to have everything you need within arm's reach. You can get up from where you're working and access something. You only need immediately around you what you need to provide a service while the client is there with you.
Mhm. This is my struggle.
Well, it does have a lot to do with your limitations of space, certainly.
Hmm.
But in positioning the tools and supplies, I only have immediately next to me and with me when I'm working with clients those things that I know I'm going to be using. And the things that I don't use very frequently are nowhere near me. Um, and over time, if you find that you access those things less and less or need them less and less, that may be the first thing that you donate or you sell or you give to a colleague, because you'll find yourself not really using those things anymore. We want to make sure that if we're transferring product from a larger container and storing it in a smaller container near the client to use, we want to make sure that we're labeling that container appropriately and we're holding on to that original container so that it has all of the manufacturer's instructions on it still, especially for use and disposal. And just the
For sure.
clutter. Oh my goodness. When you see those photographs, and I know we've talked about this before, when you see photographs of like salon of the year, and it looks like not one service has ever been performed in the salon, like it had just been recently remodeled, everything looks completely uniform from station to station. There are no personal effects anywhere. You don't see cans and jars and tools and things laid out. You just see a very clean workplace. It makes you want to work there. Like, it makes you think, like, I could do my best work if I wasn't surrounded by stuff that could distract me. I think that's part of another reason to go ahead and reduce the clutter around you, because if you're going to reach for something, reach for the thing that you actually need to use. Don't have to open up drawers and dig through stuff or search through a whole bunch of bottles that look similar to get to the one that you know you need for that next step in your procedure.
Well, and a lot of this stuff is just dust catchers or um, things that to me just make a space look dirty, or that the work isn't what shines, it's the ambiance or whatever. um it's not a TGI Fridays. You don't need your trumpet from high school hanging on the wall. Like, you can keep it nice and clean and minimal.
And I listed the transition quickly phrase to actually apply to more than one thing. We want to be able to transition quickly from step to step. Like, it should just flow. You should be able to do it like you could do it in your sleep. Like, you're not even thinking about it anymore. That's how it should flow. But also transitioning quickly from client to client so that you're not creating a bunch of work for yourself in between, but you're doing exactly what it is that you need to do to make sure that you're following the health and safety rules.
Yeah, just setting down dirty tools. Where do you set them? If you have to, where can I put like laundry, things like that? Like, you should have some type of cadence and system set up for that, so that it's not a mystery every time.
No, and I think one of the things where we know we slow down is when we do change our procedures. If we were to reverse the order of what we did or whatever, any change to our procedure will slow us down initially. But as we get better at it and we are more practiced, it will become habitual and then we'll pick up that speed.
For
And
sure.
then lastly, I put on here like cleaning your tools. And I focus on the word tools because I want to clean the things that bring me the most value, the things that I'm not going to be replacing all the time. I don't want to be cleaning things that I should just be disposing of. For us in the nail space, it's files. I don't want to use files that advertise themselves as being washable or disinfectable when I know that I should be using them once and disposing of them and throwing them away.
Hmm.
So the tools that I am cleaning are all of those metal tools that should last me a long time if I take good care of them. And I know that for every type of work that we do, whether it's hair, skin, or nails, there are tools that need to be cleaned. For hair people, it could be more electrical tools that they have to clean, whether the state requires them to like wipe them with a disinfectant spray or just use a wipe. Those are all things that you should know to do based on what your health and safety regulations require.
Wax pots,
Wow.
please.
Did someone bring up wax pots?
I've just been seeing some scary pictures lately.
Oh, there again. And that's your equipment, right? So you've got this equipment, and when your equipment starts to look shabby, it's because you've been sloppy during your procedures. And if there's
Yeah.
no way to get around it, you're going to have to figure it out. You're going to have to either replace that equipment often, which can get really expensive, or come up with some means of protecting the equipment so that when you're doing these services and you're doing it as quickly as you would normally, that if you do make a mess or whatever, you can clean it up and your equipment itself doesn't look like that from client to client.
And if your client hits their nail going into the lamp, fix the nail, fix the lamp, because we're just curing our dirt onto, ooh, it makes me crazy.
Yeah, you don't really want to look inside the lamp to see what's going on in there or all the different colors you've been using recently. All right. Um, hold on just a moment here. There we go. Let me make sure I'm on the right slide here. This is the last slide, but we have a lot to talk about here. And it's because these are just some of the things that you might be distracted with when you should be spending time servicing your client, when you should be actually using your hands and using your skills to produce the results your clients are paying for. And this is a pretty long list and it's not even exhaustive, right? Because we are trying to do a lot of these things even as we're working with a client. We might be talking about, when they're coming back next, or the fact that they need to change an appointment because they're going on a vacation or doing something that is going to keep them from keeping an appointment already on the schedule. You're probably thinking about processing their payments. As you're using something and you're realizing that it's getting low in the bottle, you're thinking, oh my gosh, do I have extra of that or do I need to order some supplies? Marketing your services. I mean, a lot of our social media interactions are around putting it out there that we even offer these services and trying to attract new clients. Tracking our finances. Those are things that we should be doing, but somehow that never gets done until it's tax time. The cleaning that we have to do and the laundry. I don't know any of us gets away without doing laundry. I can't really think of that, right? Hair people use laundry.
Yes, very
Skincare
much so.
people do laundry. Nail people do laundry. We all do laundry. And then just staying up to date, right? As we're trying to expand our knowledge and our professional growth, we're thinking in terms of how do we stay informed. So if we were to highlight any of these things, the things that come up most regularly, and I haven't even put retail on here, Ashley, I didn't even put on here like make suggestions to the client during the service. That means you're going to be bringing up some retail at the end of the service, making some product recommendations.
And building that into your procedure, building the
That
sales
would be
in.
nice.
Everything in this list, what I see that it has in common is just proactivity. It's not putting out fires. It's not, oh shit, I have to go to Sally's and buy more acetone because I'm out. Like it's assessing your business and managing your business as opposed to just trying to stay afloat and figure out like, okay, now I need to do this, now I need to do this. And literally hammering myself into the ground trying to do all of these things, as opposed to creating a schedule and doing these things ahead of time if at all possible.
And let's talk about that because I know that you have some resources as do I as to how we can accomplish some of these tasks so that you aren't thinking about it or being distracted during the time you are with the service because during a service you could be thinking about these things and that could distract you. But if you're actually trying to do some of these things during the service, that's really going to take away from what you're trying to accomplish. So, in terms of scheduling clients, and I will say it again, I've said it many, many times. This is why I love standing appointments because for as many clients as you can have commit to standing appointments, that's that many interactions you don't have to have. And you can only focus then on scheduling new clients or rescheduling an existing client who needs to change an appointment. That's much better than for every appointment thinking about having to book the next one as part of your procedure.
Mhm. And even scheduling the amount of time per client, like knowing ahead of time if I'm going to bake in 5 or 10 minutes for social media content creation, that's not some hour I need to find somewhere else during the week to do that. Um, so again, thinking ahead of like, I can be creating the content by making this a 75-minute situation as opposed to a 60-minute.
That's an excellent point because it's like you're actually scheduling in some of these other responsibilities as part of the service, particularly if you're taking photographs of the clients.
Mhm, definitely.
And then processing payments. Oh my goodness. This is one where, I wish that talk about consistency. Wouldn't it be easier if every client paid the same way each time? Like if
It
you
would be
just
great.
knew Bob always paid cash and Susan always wrote a check or whatever it is that they do, because then you sort of like prime yourself for, okay, I'm going to have to like give this person change, or this person's going to be using their credit card, and I know I'm going to have to be you doing something at the front with the machine or whatever it is. I think here's where we have to think about what could we do to streamline this, and part of it may just be billing people in advance or having them be invoiced immediately before their service or some other mechanism by which you collect payment that doesn't involve you spending time, but that you shouldn't have to spend too much actually getting paid.
Well, hopefully this has been a little bit more streamlined just in the past year because a lot of us aren't accepting cash or trying to do more contactless payments. And this may have just given you a little extra time anyway as just a byproduct.
Part of this consistency also could be whether or not a client tips. And if a client usually falls into a routine and I know that routine, I will just quickly go through that process and say, I'm tapping this and tapping that. Is that good? Good. Okay. Then we're, as much as I can do, I would rather do it. I'm not interested in sending receipts to clients unless they specifically ask me. So if you can get your processing system to not require signatures and all of those things that in the past were requirements, they're not required so much anymore.
Hmm. Very true.
Oh my goodness, ordering supplies. How much time is wasted doing this? Where we're perhaps we have a list of suppliers, which we should all know where we get our stuff, right? We should know where we get our stuff. It should be easy to find. We shouldn't be Google searching every time we need to replace something, or if we're always trying to find the best pricing on something. I'd like to think I could rely on some suppliers who will be the best option every single time. The only time I really price shop is if I'm investing in something more expensive.
Something I learned in my time in retail is that you can't know what you need until you know what you have. And so part of this is doing inventory, figuring out how often you need to do it based on how often you order. Um, but inventory, just taking the quick stock of what you have is really, really important. So you don't end up with 15 cases of carrier bags that you don't really go through.
And unlike a Costco shopping trip, can you actually just put the things you actually intended to purchase in the shopping cart and purchase? Or do you find yourself getting distracted on the website that you're purchasing from? It's amazing, like how good these companies are at getting you to buy more than you actually need.
Oh yeah, good old impulse buys.
And you shouldn't be spending all that much time ordering supplies anyway. I mean, I can't imagine. I mean, not to say that I don't spend a lot on supplies. I spend what I need to spend, but I'm not doing it every single month. I have a system for, and this may be subject for another class, for what I need to buy so that, I'm not ordering on a weekly basis or a bi-weekly basis. I try to order, like every 3 months if I can get away with it.
Well, yeah, especially when
If
you're
not
buying a
longer
pallet of
gaps.
paraffin at a time. Shouldn't be ordering all that
that
often.
pal that pallet paraffin is going to last me a lot longer this time.
I
And
bet.
then
I bet.
tracking your finances. This is where the payment processing and any kind of scheduling software you use can help you in terms of the money that you bring in, but the money that you spend, that's a different situation. So anything like Quicken or QuickBooks or Mint or any of the wonderful, really user-friendly programs that you can use to force you to account for your own expenses and your income would be a huge help, not only to yourself but to your tax preparer when tax season arrives. Are you hiding your face?
I'm hiding my face. Um, I think this one kind of comes down to make it Money Monday or Financial Friday or whatever you need it to be, and just get it on the schedule. I saw this meme that was like, I've been driving around for 8 months with something in my trunk, and I finally put it away, and it took me 6 minutes. Um, like the dread of doing something like that. If you can break it down into, eat the elephant one bite at a time. I'm.
That's excellent.
It would be so great if I could follow my own advice on this, wouldn't it? Just be the best.
Oh no, I thoroughly agree because it's all about, excuse me, it's all about intentions, and then we have the fact that what we intend and what we actually accomplish are two different things. And I think we're always striving to do better, but I think this is reinforcing because it does sort of it's freeing to have these things taken care of. I think it gives us the opportunity to explore and to, I don't know, it's kind of self-fulfilling in doing these things.
Well, what I need to tell myself is, if I can't find 30 minutes a week, how am I going to find 2 whole weeks to get this done? Now, you would think, having worked since I was 15, I would have this down. No, ma'am. No, ma'am.
Well, speaking of multitasking, if you just saw the Clean My Mac app decided to pop up on our screen here while I was doing this, and I had not clicked on anything. So, really,
Uh-oh.
what was going to help me work faster is my goal, which by the end of the year is to invest in a new laptop. I know, right? But it's these kinds of things where the time that I spend trying to make space on a computer that's running out of room is
Hmm.
wasted time. It really is. So, there comes a time where you find that even some of the technology that you're working with, some of the systems or services that you've relied on to do some of these managing your business tasks, and in this case, the laptop is a piece of equipment that I use to do all of these things, right? All of these things I do either using my phone or my laptop. And I've upgraded my phone recently, but for doing this sort of work, I'd much rather use a laptop. Part of it's my eyes. I'd rather have that big screen in front of me and that sort of thing. So that is on my list to track my finances and to make sure I budget to allow for the purchase of a brand new laptop. Let's talk about
Um,
cleaning and doing laundry because, or do you want to talk about your laptop situation?
no, 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 ma'am. I do not. I just was recently without mine for about 10 days, and it was very difficult while I waited for it to be repaired. But if you're spending time battling a piece of technology more than it's worth, I think that's definitely something to reassess.
Or spending time on hold, trying to call their customer service or whatever, trying to resolve how to use something. And I know there's a learning curve to any sort of technology or product service you try to use. That there comes a point where you think, okay, maybe this just isn't the most convenient thing for me to use. Maybe there's something better. And that's
Yeah.
where, hopefully we're here to help make suggestions because we've tried a lot of different services. We've had experiences with them, and we're happy to share what works for us and what doesn't and why.
The sunk
So,
cost fallacy is real.
in fact, on my list to call today is QuickBooks about my payroll processing because the price just went up recently, and for the quality of service that I've been receiving from them recently, I think I'm due some sort of discount.
Yeah. Go get
The
'em.
cleaning and laundry, I wish this were something that we could delegate, as much as we can get done. Like if we could build the cleaning into our service, sort of clean as you go, something we think about when we're perhaps cooking in our kitchens, as opposed to like waiting till the end and having this huge mess to deal with. I think most people would rather just walk out the door at the end of their day and walk away from their mess than to deal with it. But cleaning is something we need to do on a regular basis. And then, of course, the laundry piles up. And the solution is not to buy more towels.
Are you sure?
I did just buy new towels and I had to buy more quantity than I would normally, but that's only because going back to the same supplier I've used for many, many years, they've increased the minimum quantity that you have to order. So what I did
Oh,
was I ordered the towels and I did the initial laundry with them, but then I set half of them aside.
smart.
So I'll introduce those later when I need to. And then lastly, this idea of staying informed. Oh my gosh, how many times do I receive messages from you guys? And thank you for like sending them to me. And I'm sure Ashley appreciates it as well. Where you're like, oh my God, have you seen this? And
Yes.
oftentimes the answer is no, I haven't because I'm too busy doing these other things, like trying to clean my laptop. But it's hard to stay informed. It's hard to stay on top of everything. And our interests do change. And, what do we pay attention to that just is there to amuse us? Or what do we really need to pay attention to because it actually impacts our business?
Yes. We have to manage what is the time suck and what is actually producing, um, what is supporting our income, what is supporting business needs as opposed to just distracting ourselves from dealing with maybe doing your taxes, or whatever your own personal example might be.
Well, and all of this is separate from providing services, right? You could delegate all of these things on this list. You could pay someone to do, not one person because that'd be a lot. But you could pay people to do these things if you were so inclined. But when we get to it, fundamentally, we're service providers. And what we get paid to do is not all these other things. I don't get paid to schedule clients. I don't get paid to track my finances. I'd like to think that I save money by doing these things for myself to the extent that I do. But what really pays my bills is the time that I spend with my clients. And I want to make sure that that time is as efficient as possible, and yet they still feel pampered.
For sure. It's a good balance to strike.
Do we have any questions? So much laundry.
So much laundry.
So much laundry. And about the laundry, I have to say that I have to bring it home. I don't know how many people are able to do laundry at their place of work. I think it's going to become more and more likely that people will be doing laundry at home because as more people move into suite situations, those suites do not have laundry facilities.
Or not ideal laundry facilities, that's for sure. I've
Right.
really tried to move away from having to do any sort of laundry, and move into just disposable table towels and things like that, which is more expensive. But for me, it's worth it in just the time savings of having to deal with it and haul it. And,
Right. Right.
um, so if you want to jump on to audio or camera, feel free to ask your question. Otherwise, you can also feel free to type it into the chat if you have any questions specifically about streamlining your services or um, any of the stuff that we talked about today or just anything in general, really. Feel
I know
free.
I've been doing a lot of talking. Yes, please.
But it's all been really good. Like I always learn something from you when it comes to just efficiency of movement and efficiency of setting up your station and not having to reach across or dig something out of a drawer every time or whatever that might be. Even if it's just setting up an internal system of your drawers, your trolleys, those sorts of things, the way you have your supplies staged ready to go, pick up the basket, put the pack in, walk over. There's no wasted movement or step or anything like that. And it's really impressive to see how you have really thought this through all the way to, what you're doing when the client isn't even in the building.
We had to reorganize again because at the beginning of the pandemic, when so much was made of what we were touching, I tried to reduce what we're touching even
Mhm.
more because we take for granted how many things that we're putting our hands on. And then because I have someone who works with me, it's that she and I did not want to be touching the same things without having our hands be clean. And it's like, oh my goodness. Like if you were really treating yourself as if you were contaminated, like that mere touch could be something that could harm someone, you'll find yourself touching things a lot less.
Sure. Garbage lids of bins, all of those things. Like, I think it should even, when you're mapping out your services, I think if you're in a room where the lights turn off, like that should be built into, like, client is positioned, towels are placed, light is turned off. Like in that, I was just listening to my dad's podcast for the first time. I was catching up on it because my dad has a podcast. And he was interviewing someone who came from the military. And he was one of the first people in the cleaning industry to come up with, he wrote his own policies, procedures, and manuals just when he was working alone, because that is what he learned in college and in the military. And he was one of the first people to do it. And he said, you don't really know a process until you have to teach it. And even if it is teaching it to yourself by making it more and more compact and efficient, it's definitely a level of scrutiny I think we could all use on our services and what they entail.
Well, and you think the touching, it's the faucet handles, the door and drawer knobs. It just goes on and on and on. And while we realize now that that's not as likely a means of transmission, it still makes you think. And as clients watch you work, they're thinking it too.
We've all been to
And
Subway where they make the sub sandwich and then they keep the gloves on and then they take your money and they touch the drawer and you're like,
no,
no, thank you, please. No, thank
no,
you.
thank you. Well, and I know I'm not done in terms of the things that I've set up. I've gone to a lot of touchless things. Some of the products I've been using for years aren't available any longer. I'm having to change suppliers on some things. And I just think it's really worthwhile to check in periodically with not only your procedures, but the resources that you use to supply yourself to execute those procedures.
I have to completely strip my entire kit down again, clean everything again, go through, replace everything with new stuff. It's over there hanging out in the background. But I mean, when I first started, I had like a hockey bag of stuff. And now I have this little like train case, like little, because I've pared way, way, way down, because my back hurts when I have to carry it. But I have to go through, I have to buy all new tools, because I now have an autoclave. Thank you. And yeah, it's just like revisiting, do I actually need this? And usually for me, the answer is no.
Well, and part of that is the expectation of what you're doing when you go on a job, right? So you know you've already had the conversation about what it is that you're going to do and what the client's expecting. And so it's not a situation where you get there and they say, well, can you do this? And you look in your bag and say, well, no, I really can't because I don't have that particular tool or product.
Right. No, I've definitely covered my bases that way because I have been caught out in those situations where I'm like, oh, never again. I am never hand filing off a full set of acrylics ever again.
Oh,
But now every set I walk onto has a safety officer. So I have to be able to explain, here's what I'm doing, here's how I'm keeping everyone safe, here's, blah, blah, blah. Adriana just said that that happened to her at Subway a month ago. I'm so sorry. I hope you got extra cookies for that. But yeah, this is really just the perfect time. I know we talked about it when we didn't really know how long the panoramic was going to last in the very beginning. And we said, oh, it's a perfect time to update your website and stupid. But now this really is the perfect time to revisit your policies and procedures and figure out what serves me, what doesn't.
Right. And from this, if you need to have that conversation with yourself about your pricing, it would flow very nicely from stripping down things to their basics. And it's not that you are going to lower your prices. You're not going to do that. What you might be doing instead is when you do raise your prices, you're going to be increasing your profit margin by that much more.
I'm all for that. Awesome. Well, we're at the hour. If anyone has any other questions, feel free to throw them into the chat. But Jaime, I love this. This was super helpful. I'm excited for everyone to watch on the replay as well. I think this is one that just, I think, touches every part of our industry and every discipline.
Well, and it forces me to think about going back again to my procedures, because even though I'm doing things differently, I haven't committed it to writing yet, and I need to do that.
Gotta love a manual. Excuse to buy new binders.
And a new laptop.
Please, for the love of God, get a new laptop.
Well, Ashley, thank you so much for co-hosting this with me. I really appreciate it. And for those who have joined us today, thank you so much for spending your time with us. We love having you here, and this new format with Zoom is a bit different. It does allow you to interact with us a bit more, and whether you choose to do that or not during the class is entirely up to you. And if you have something to share, I would love to see some procedures. I would love to see some before and afters of people's procedures, because I think it would be fascinating. I know my first procedures came from beauty school, and procedures I do now look nothing like what I learned in beauty school.
What, you're not using the procedure for your hot oil manicure anymore?
No, not only am I not doing that, I'm not soaking in a finger bowl. I'm not doing that either.
No, exactly. I'm not changing out my chamois. Yeah, but very cool. Well, thank you for this, Jaime. Thanks everybody for watching, and those of you who attended and those of you watching on the replay. We appreciate you.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.